The Bible teaches conspiracy. Currently, a lot of stuff is being said about conspiracy. It's all over Christian media. It's all over the secular stuff. There's 1.2 million mentions of Bill Gates. The word conspire means to breathe together. I think it can be a neutral word. It's generally a negative word, but if two people gather together, they share the same thoughts, and act a plan to do something, normally in secret or semi-hidden at least, that's a conspiracy. When we go through today, you may experience some cognitive dissonance. That is not the intention, but it may happen. I would suggest, I'm preparing you in advance for it, which is cognitive dissonance, something your head hears and you're like, whoa, that doesn't compute. And it could be, I believe it's because of a clash of biblical worldview and the worldview that we're generally given. And they're two irreconcilable perspectives. They don't fit. And the biblical worldview rolled out into everyday life does not fit with what we're educated to believe. I'm going to mention a few things, and when I do so, you could, as Keller has said, you could, like a hyperlink, you could touch me and you get another hour on each subject. I'm not going to go into them. I will supply links later on a website. So some of the conspiracies I mentioned, Gates, there's also stuff with Soros, race wars. I'm in no way validating either of them. I'm just saying these are being talked about. And despite the race wars things, I'll use that language if I reference it, because obviously the Bible teaches there's one human race and many nations, but and then languages, it's just a helpful, maybe an unhelpful abbreviation. Maybe I shouldn't use it, but what do Christians have to say? There have been 12 articles that I've read in conservative evangelical circles. One, I'll highlight. Some of the other vibes we'll pick up as we go along. I'm probably quoting him out of context. This is a whole quote. I probably misunderstood it, so I'm not giving you the person's name. Conspiracy theories don't hold up. Nobody is that competent and powerful to pull them off. Even giant bureaucracies are made up of lots of small, incompetent units fighting petty turf wars, a fragmentation which undermined the possibility of the kind of coordinated efforts required to pull off, say, the fabrication of the Holocaust. History, humanly speaking, is a tale of incompetence and thoughtlessness, not of elaborate and sophisticated cabals. Evil and catastrophic evil is not exceptional and brilliant. It is humdrum and banal. It does not involve thinking too much. It involves thinking too little. I want to give you an illustration. Imagine you're in a country or empire, and there are polarization is occurring in the media. There's sort of people, groups being demonized on left and on right. There's this polarization, and one group's getting blamed for causing trouble in the streets and all kinds of violence. There's ethnic slurring going on, and there are some sort of all kinds of whack theories going about occasionally in non standard media. You hear about babies being thrown in the air and machine gunned and trains of people. They've got lots of high tech, the most sophisticated high tech human tracking system ever. I am, of course, talking about Nazi Germany, where the Jews were being attacked in the mainstream media. The communists were being called troublemakers, and the Hollerist human tracking system was used by IBM or processing. As a study, it's interesting what happened in the Holocaust. What would you believe if you believe the mainstream narratives, or the ones that most popularly went around, so eventually they would come to Hitler would come to power, and it would become a mainstream narrative after the Reichstag fire in 1934, which was also fraudulent. He'd also that was called a false flag operation. We only know about it after the war. Goering, in Nuremberg trials, Goering revealed that from memory, he revealed that we burned it down. Poland, again, the whole start of the war was based on false flag. Oh, Poland have attacked us. They bombed our radio outpost. 2 of our German soldiers, actually Jews in German uniform, have been killed. Terrible. We're going to go to war. Mainstream narrative there used 1934 to take over, to create tyranny and to create a war, and also to demonize the Jews and set them up for termination. It can be very dangerous. Just believing mainstream narrative wholesale can lead to great danger. You said Nazi Germany. Oh, that was the Germans, they're very orderly, they think in a certain way, and they just believe that stuff. Not in our country, not in our town. So are the Germans morally inferior to English and Americans? Or are all humans created morally equal in the sight of God? I'd say that view, not in our country, in our town, is unsustainable from a biblical point of view. It's not a biblical worldview of man, and there's inherent racism in it. Learned and moral superiority, an idea of supremacy, that you're better, and that's delusional and it's dangerous. You could learn lessons from history if you want to know. Just Google Ron Clark and the wave or lesson plan. Good psychological manipulation can work wonders for a people. There were some Christians I read about. They heard the trains going past at night. They were near the railway station. They heard trains going past at night. When they heard the whistle coming, they said, we started to sing. Or they may not have been Christians, sorry. They may have been another religious group, but let's say they were Christians. They heard the train coming. They started to sing. And they started to sing because they knew that they would hear screams of the people crammed in the carriages going past, as they'd hear it, screams for help as they went through a town. They would sing loudly enough to, and they said if we could still hear the screams, we just sing louder. It must be very difficult to hear stuff and think, I can do nothing about this. No one's going to believe it. Maybe I forget where it was. If it was in a town or whatever. I just thought it was interesting that they tried to bury it. It was too much. The moral obligation to do something was too horrific. It's just better. It's easier sometimes to look away from it, and I can understand that and sympathise with it. And that's often the case with some of the stuff, the evil that goes on in the world. It's easier not to think about it. Because some of it's very ugly and very awkward, and you think, what can I do? And some of it was too crazy to believe. A Jew who had been a German Jew, I think, taken out of a Hungarian town, came back to his Hungarian village because he'd escaped, and he said, they are machine gunning babies in the air. They killed all of us. And he was viewed as crazy, too crazy to believe. They came into town, Germans were all friendly. Oh, see, the Germans love us. Then they separated into 2 camps. It's all fine. But no, it wasn't fine. It didn't end up that way. But it was too crazy to believe. Humans don't do this. Humans don't do this kind of stuff. They do. They do this. It was the same on recovery. A general was told by 2 sergeants, this is down the road, about the camps he was about to enter. They're like, nah, I don't believe it. And he would believe it. A day later, he would believe it. So whose narrative do we buy? If we were in Germany, whose narrative would we have bought? And does it matter? Conspiracies cause harm. Yes, they do. And does it matter what you believe? Does it matter what narrative you buy and how you think? Yes, in our country and in our town. I think the track record, I have to look at this, the track record shows that, yes, especially in our country, in our town, if you look at the slavery and exploitation that happened, just as Pharaoh did to the Israelites, We ran the largest, had a monopoly on slave empire for years and years. Slavery is more well known, utterly, unbelievably wicked. Didn't happen much at all on UK shores. 10 to 15,000 well-treated domestic slaves. So people couldn't imagine when Newton the whistleblower started and others started talking about the true horrors of slavery. People couldn't imagine it. And maybe it was uncomfortable to hear, but we needed to hear. It still took a long time for us to move on that. Opium. Again, I'm just showing this to show we've got a serious track record. So saying Nazi Germany, yes, us too, easily. Opium, we were the single largest supplier of opium in the world from 1770-ish to 1930. We forced China to take it in lieu of payments. We fought wars over the rights to deal drugs to China. We had shipped 6,500 tons of opium in 1880. That's a street value of approximately $2 trillion today. In 1906, almost 23.3%, almost a quarter of the adult male population were opium addicts, of 420 million total population. And the Chinese refer to it as the century of humiliation. And if you wonder why Chinese may have a problem with white people and think of them as white devils, I entirely get it. I think it's a fair evaluation of history. Unfortunately, it is just humankind. I'm not excusing it. Humans are wicked. The Bible teaches it. We need to really believe it and grapple with that. Empires are wicked. Humans by nature tend to wickedness. Utterly wicked and deceitful above all things is our heart. That's me. I am wicked. India, to grow the opium, we had indentured labour for tea, a form of slavery really, and opium production. One is Indian guy who looked into it and was cited on the BBC, said he reckons that India accounted for 25% of world exports when Britain took over, and by the time we left it was 1% of world exports. And so we sucked it dry, and we developed the drug industry. You might want to read the book Politics of Heroin if you want to see global involvement of governments into developing the drug trade. It's primarily a government and intelligence agency thing. Satanic conspiracy. Okay, I'll give you an example. I want to talk of the Bible teaches conspiracy. The ultimate one is the satanic conspiracy. The satanic conspiracy. The outline of it is it began in the garden by Satan and then his angels and demons. It ends with Judgment Day. It's to defraud God of relationship with his children, with man, and man, his children, with relationship with him, thereby consigning them to hell. It says he was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there's no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature. He is a liar and the father of lies. Okay, so deception is fundamental to his nature and being. Sun Tzu would say all warfare is based on deception, 7th century BC. So this stuff chimes with very famous secular philosophers and so on. Ephesians 2. You formerly walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. Among them we too all formerly lived in the lusts of our flesh, and indulging the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest. He's the prince of the power of the air. He's no small chicken. He's got power. Stand firm in the prayer to the Ephesians. Stand firm against the scheme of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness and in the heavenly places. There is there is a spiritual conspiracy, and spiritual forces are arrayed against the kingdom of God and against man. He wishes to hold his own people, the people he has already, captive. Even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Therefore, it is not surprising if his servants also disguise themselves as servants of righteousness. So he doesn't always look like he's a bad guy with talents. He presents nicely. But he holds the whole world under his sway, in 1 John 5. Antichrists. 1 John 2:18. This is the last hour, and as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come. This is how we know it is the last hour. They went out from us, for they were not of us. So there are many Antichrists, but I also think that the scriptures would indicate there will be one final Antichrist before the coming of the Lord. But there are many types. There's a kind of perennial type that applies throughout time. Divide and conquer is one of Satan's great strategies. He's a divisive guy. He separates man from God and man from man. Adam and Eve are separated in the first successful conspiracy and deception, fraud and deception. He achieves his goal and separates through lies. Judaizers and the Jew-Gentile challenge in the New Testament. It's one of the dominant themes, and it's a classic example of that. Satan trying to divide the church over, you think of Acts 6 and the Gentile, the Hellenistic Jews, widows, and so just beginning from there and going throughout the whole New Testament. If he can separate our people, he will. I want to also say that there's this gathering at the end. Revelation 16 says, I saw 3 unclean spirits. They are spirits of demons performing signs which go out to the kings of the earth and of the whole world to gather them to battle on that great day of God Almighty. Now, when the 1,000 years have expired, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations which are in the 4 corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. They went up on the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints in the beloved city, and fire came down out of heaven and devoured them. I just want you to note there that obviously they lose, but it's the gathering together. Spirits of demons go out to the world, they deceive the kings of the earth, and they gather them together. This kind of ties in with Daniel 11, that kind of, and 2 Thessalonians, that kind of deception vibe is there and present. Just on a meta-narrative level, so the whole picture of the narrative of the Bible, the satanic conspiracy, it begins, there's a garden with water of life and tree of life and happiness, man dwelling with God. Then there's this deception comes in. The Tower of Babel comes soon after. And here at the end of Scripture, you've got Babylon appearing again in Revelation 17, 18, 19, defeated. Then you've got again a city, garden city, water of life, God dwelling. After Babel, you've got nations splitting and dividing, and here with Babel, around Babel, you've got nations gathering together. So you've got where there was attempted convergence leading to divergence, there's a tendency towards convergence again. Nations coalescing and being gathered together and working. So there's a sort of chiastic meta structure to the whole of scriptures. Okay, that's that. You don't need to fear. There's no need to fear at all. God winces it. He's totally in control. I'm just saying this is the structure. God's counter-conspiracy floored it at the cross. Okay, he triumphed in them, making a public spectacle of them in the cross. He ended death. He ended everything. It was all unraveled in the middle of the scriptures. In a sense, the center point is the cross, obviously, and that unraveled everything for Satan. Applied to the real world, I've talked about Sun Tzu. All warfare is based on deception, but if you think I'm overcooking it, what what do you think we've got 3-letter agencies: MI5, CIA, FBI. Well, if I get the KGB, the German ones, and the Israeli ones, and then what do? Why do we need Freedom of Information Acts? Well, there's national security. They are typically hiding conspiracies and things that need to be kept secret. And arguably, there's a case for that for national security. But have secular governments got a good track record for this? I looked at some examples. What was the British Empire up to? Have we got a good track record? We were selling heroin opium into China up until 1930. They didn't want it all that time. They fought over it. Have we got a good track record? What's your view of man? Are governments Christian? Are they believers? We've seen how good David was, and he's like the best king after God's own heart. And power, he struggles, man. Are they going to struggle? What's your view of man? And does it fit? Have you got a biblical view of man? Vietnam happened on a pretext. We know that now. Freedom of Information Act. The incident in Tonkin Bay where a US naval ship was attacked by the North Vietnamese is false. It didn't happen. It was staged in order to provide a pretext for going to war in Vietnam. And it worked very nicely. We know about that a long time afterwards. Maybe for years, that was a conspiracy theory. Did it harm people? Did it matter? You judge. Machiavelli. He's a great philosopher. I mean, it's interesting to read. I think if everyone was a Machiavellian, it would be a nightmarish world. The end justifies the means, but it's his kind of approach to political approach is a sort of realpolitik. If it works, do it. It's pragmatism. And if you know the people he was writing about, they would invite their enemies to dinner and then cut their throats. It was there's an approach, certainly. Not all governance is good governance. It's the kind of governance you might feel safe in. Now they want to present well. Satan wants to present as an angel of light, and he's good with lies, so he can do that. Do you think his people who are like his father are not going to emulate him? That's not what Paul says. Paul says they'll be like their father. Lord Acton says power tends to corrupt. Absolute power, absolutely. This is a brilliant truism. It's biblical. That ticks the box, doesn't it? It's a biblical truism. It has the view of man is weak, but given position, you see David, good guy, great guy after God's own heart, but the position, the temptation to abuse, it's so real. God help us if we were in that position. The people desire, the scriptures also talk about wrong ones, in a sense, desiring a preeminence. I desire preeminence. It's in all human nature. People will desire preeminence. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Do monopolies exist? Have you heard of a monopoly? Do we think Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft had a monopoly trial in 2099? Monopolies are real. They actually exist. There are monopoly trials. These are conspiracies, in a sense, by definition, of the company, working to defraud and to abuse its power. Questions like cui bono, who benefits, are good questions to ask, and they're not conspiracy theory questions. They fit. It's a negative press has been given to good biblical approach of a certain questioning mindset and cynicalness about human nature. If human nature is corrupt and love of money corrupts all kinds of things, then when there's a lot of money at stake, of course we've got to think of motives. Who would benefit? Who would make a lot of money out of this? Does anyone make a lot of money? These are valid questions to ask. Shutting them down is not helpful. Whose narrative do you buy? Whose narrative do you buy? Oh man, have you heard about the Christians in Rome? Bruv! Man, who's their teacher? Who's their pastor, man? Shame on him. Shame on him. He incited them to burn it down, no less. Oh, and they deserved what they got, getting put on the old lamppost and tarred up and lit up with flames. Whose conspiracy theory are you buying? Secular media promoted? Where would that have put you in the time of Nero? Where would that have put me? Sorry if I'm being polemical here. Forgive me. Have you looked into the claim, whatever it is, yourself? Does it fit with your worldview? Where's the evidence? You can't look into everything, but some things presented with evidence may have some interest. Right. Conspiracy theories cause harm. I can't go on too long. I've got to jump past these. I'm just going to fly past them. War with the Middle East. Recently, Building 7 went down in 9/11. 3,000 architects want an inquiry. They question that how could it have come down without controlled demolition? Building 7. 9/11 Architects for Truth. Look it up. Dr. Kelly killed himself. 13 doctors request inquiry. They don't think the evidence fits. Does it matter? 1.2 million dead Iraqis by 2007, $2.4 trillion in debt, 2017, including interest. That's just the US. In terms of suicide, bit of Bible, Ben Hadad. So Hazael left Elisha and went to his master, who asked him, "What did Elisha say to you?" And he replied, "He told me that you would surely recover." But the next day, Hazael took a thick cloth, dipped it in water, and spread it over the king's face. So Ben-Hadad died, and Hazael reigned in his place. And how did that go down amongst his crowd? He died in his sleep peacefully. Maybe he had a heart attack. You know that we only know that story because of God there. That's not how. That's not wasn't published. Vitamin C cures cancer. I had one of the articles I read attacked this. So Linus Pauling. I'm sorry, that's why he's getting a mention here, because I have so much respect for Linus Pauling. Double Nobel Prize winner, said vitamin C cures cancer. 1979, a study ended the general interest in vitamin C. A Mayo Clinic study by Dr. Mertel. Rigorous scientific study. The article I read said Linus Pauling died of cancer. How tragic is that? He couldn't cure himself. Physician, heal yourself. Linus Pauling died at 93 of cancer. Dr. Mortel also died of cancer, but he died at 66. He was the doctor that disproved Linus Pauling's theory that cancer cures. He disproved it by stuff that's been completely debunked since on cancer sites and so on. You just have to look up Linus Pauling, cancer.gov. Away you go. It's well explained, or virginia.edu if you want. Lives saved, that's 40, well, I know it kind of got rediscovered 2000, but it took a while to gain acceptance, 2012. 30 years, it's been kind of hidden, and even now it's proof that even now it suffers from the slur that it achieved at the time. Vitamin C cures cancer, that was a harmful one. Evolution. Creationists think there's compelling evidence that man has seen dinosaurs. Surely not. It would be reported. Obviously, if it was reported, the entire geological column dating method collapses and the room for theistic evolution or evolution of any kind disappears, because you've got an age problem, you've got a date of the earth problem, because of the rock layers and the separation of time between man and the first man and last dinosaur. Also, racism is logical if you're an evolutionist. We're all evolving. Some of us are maybe evolving at different rates. Maybe some of us are on a slightly higher plane than others. It kind of justifies some of the social Darwinianism that occurred and was already thought about, the dehumanizing of people. You could think Aborigines probably have a low view of evolution, because they were taken as exhibits for museum. Many of them were stuffed and taken. The angel of death, as she was known, Amalie Dietrich, was she had a little family. She said, "Can you get a whole family and some young ones as well?" And then they would stuff them and put them in museums in the West. The Smithsonian Institute had 30,000 remains of Aborigines in its thing. I think they've returned 10,000 in 2010 after great duress, many years' work. The Aborigine population in Australia have suffered grievously as a result of some of this treatment. They're 3.3% of the population in Australia, 28% of the jail population. That's an overrepresentation of nearly 10 times. But I guess they just need to take a good hard look at themselves and fix up. They've got problems. That's what some of the conservative viewpoint on race wars now would say, that kind of approach, and I think that's very dangerous. I think not acknowledging some of the wickedness that happens in these areas in particular exposes you to overlooking injustices and perpetuating them. Every archaeological or manuscript find that supports the Bible isn't reported, and because the suppression of truth is satanic, so it's ignored. Why would you want to promote it? Satan has an interest in concealing the truth and hiding it. And yes, he can do that through meta-narrative, through his spirit at work and the desires of the flesh and all that. This is not some sort of controlled, massive cabal scheme. I'm just saying these things happen, and there is a wickedness that amazing things are suppressed. And this is part of the meta-narrative of the satanic conspiracy that suppresses the truth and keeps people from believing the truth. So without evidence-based, we are evidence-based believers. If the truth is true, it stands up to investigation. We're not afraid of investigation. The scriptures explicitly say, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they're from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Now that's about spirits, but it applies to other things as well. You think of Luke's the original investigative journalist. What does he say? Inasmuch as many have taken in hand to set in order a narrative of things that have been fulfilled among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word to delivered them to us, it seemed good to me also, even though I had eyewitness reports, having had a perfect understanding of all things from the very first, to write to you an orderly account, most excellent Theophilus, that you may know the certainty of those things in which you were instructed. So he uses eyewitnesses, and he's very careful and diligent to look into it. Dr. Luke turned journalist. It happens, people of one profession can do journalism, investigative journalism, and it's good to do. I think believers especially are into investigative journalism, especially when there's issues of corruption and injustice at stake. Let each be fully convinced in his own mind. It's a personal thing, and be convinced on the basis of evidence. Yes, certainly also we say incompetence happens, but I think the idea that all history is just a series of bungling mistakes, I just think it's not tenable. Catastrophic evil is not exceptional and brilliant. It is humdrum and banal. Humanly speaking, history is a tale of incompetence and thoughtlessness. Well, that's humanly speaking. I'm afraid I can't call some of the monopolies that exist incompetent. I think that's just not naive. I say that respectfully. Satan is obviously not part of that, included in that, humanly speaking. His conspiracy is exempted, but many of these things that have been achieved in the past. You think of our operation in India. We kept it from British shores. The slavery, we kept it from British shores. Nazi Germany, the pulling off of the Holocaust. Never mind its denial. The pulling off of it. Basically, Germans didn't know about it. Pretty impressive. Basically, English people didn't entirely know about slavery. It took a while to let them really know what was happening. and the Opium Wars, and that stuff people still don't know about. People in India don't know that they were of the true misery that we inflicted on them. So yeah, it's a I think there are examples of competent empires that were wicked and conspired to wickedness. You could go back further in history. I'm not all empires are wicked. The Mongols built towers of skulls. I'm just picking on us because if it's very easy to look down the nose at Germans or the Mongols, all those wicked heathen. And let's look a little closer to home, because that's, at the end of the day, God's not about us judging others; it's about judging ourselves. Gullibility is not a gift, someone said, but neither is naivety. Discernment is called for. Everything I said above surely calls, and the fact that deception is clear from the scriptures, there will be deception. You don't be a mug. Naivety is not a gift. It says the prudent, the simple believe everything and suffer harm. The prudent see danger and pass it by. 3 proverbs repeating that. The simple believe everything. Don't believe everything, especially not from secular media. That you can't trust them. I mean, respectfully, they may be doing a lot of truth, but are they fully trustworthy? Is Nero fully trustworthy? Coming on to Nero, I want to reveal some hidden idol worship at high level. I think it's important. God does it. Yes, it's about the children of Israel. The one I'm going to cite. Let me read it to you. So he brought me to the door, to Ezekiel. So he brought me to the door of the court. When I looked, he's in a vision. When I looked, there was a hole in the wall. And then he said to me, son of man, dig into the wall. And when I dug into the wall, there was a door. And he said, go in and see the wicked abominations which they're doing there. So I went in and saw every sort of creeping things, abominable beasts, all the idols of the house was portrayed all around the walls. And there stood before them 70 men of the elders of the house of Israel, and in their midst stood Jazaniah the son of Shaphan. Each man had a censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up. And then he said to me, son of man, have you seen what the elders of the house of Israel do in the dark, every man in the room of his idols? For they say, the Lord does not see us, the Lord has forsaken the land. And he said to me, turn again, and you will see greater abominations that they are doing. The Bohemian Grove has idol worship. Apparently, superficially, as they say, it's just a game. That's one thing. But they've got an effigy of an infant that they burn, and then their screams come out of the flames when they're burning it. They burn it in front of a statue of an owl. There are parallels there, disturbing parallels for a Christian of Chemosh and Molech and Milcom worship, the passing through the fire of the infants back in the day. They say it's all very light-hearted. One boy says he was there. Ron Johnson says there's a frat boy thing. It's nothing serious. So I'm going to bring in Bonacci and the Franklin incident. This guy, a boy, he was involved in a huge Epstein-like child abuse ring, and he said, one instance, he describes being taken to the Bohemian Grove. He doesn't name it because he didn't know its name. He describes it. It has unique features, and he describes those features, and he later identifies the entrance. He says, I saw the boy, the bag the boy was in, a dead boy. We went over a very thick brush area with a clearing in it. Over the clearing, they dropped the boy. One said the man with the hood would take care of the body for them. In other testimony, Bonacci said that Larry King was smiling and laughing, ... and that the men with hoods were a satanic group that planned to use the dead boy in some sort of ceremony. That's what he says. So that take, tied with what they say it's light-hearted. Now there may be a light-hearted side to it, but there's definitely a serious side to it as well. His testimony stands. I'm not going to go into it. If you question it, you can get in touch. He was paid out $1 million. He was convicted of perjury initially, and 50. Let me quote Senator Schmidt on it. This came out of a Senate investigation into it. Multiple senators were involved, John DeCamp and Schmidt. Schmidt wrote in asking for the protection of one of the witnesses' lives. He said there have been entirely too many violent deaths associated with this investigation, 15 in total. 15 deaths, including the chief investigator, whose plane disintegrated in flight with the key evidence he just acquired. The boy could draw a floor plan of the presidential suite of the White House, and it's not available on public records. He was paid out $1 million for horrific things done to him in damages against the person who had done them. But none of the bigger fish was caught. Again, it's like the Epstein thing. If you wanted to look through this chain of things to see there's wickedness in high places, you might want to look at Finders, DC. You've got to have a hard stomach and don't do this. It's very unpleasant reading. Finders, DC, Dutro, Belgium, similar issue, and Epstein. For me, this shows that the Nero parallels are valid. We're talking real wickedness and corruption in high places. I mean, real wickedness. So if you think our leaders aren't like Nero, I'm afraid you're going to have to justify that using evidence, and you'd have to come to me if you want to convince me that. I'm just not persuaded. And I see a biblical continuity. I look at 1 Kings, at 1 Chronicles, 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles. I see that any king who is not the Lord's is given to utter wickedness. If David does wickedness and he's the best man there is, God, man after my own heart, all the others go untold next stage. And if they're not the Lord's, man, heaven help you. Heaven help you. The Nero parallels are valid. Honor Caesar does not mean trust him. Honor Nero. I must honor Nero, but I do not have to trust him. That is not what the Bible is asking me to do. Jesus. There was a conspiracy to kill him at birth, to compromise him in the desert, to be crowned king by force, to compromise paths offered by friends. Don't go the cross. Get behind me, Satan. He identifies a satanic conspiracy coming through the mouth of a believer. The lies of Satan had entered into Peter's mindset, and that was part of the conspiracy. No, get behind me. To murder. He's got a conspiracy to murder against him when he went against what they say, and it does that. He's not the man they expect or want. The Pharisees, arch enemies, plotted with the Herodians on how they might kill him, and then he's betrayed by a friend. He's the ultimate victim of conspiracy, and ultimately a victim of satanic conspiracy behind that. Where activity was spiritually abusive until he's 30, he kind of lets it be. We don't see him doing anything, but when he enters ministry, he does challenge it. And he's graciously at first, but repeatedly and with ever-increasing vigor, he talks about the wickedness in his times. And he does it to set his people free. Going for the hardest targets, beginning on your doorstep and to the ends of the earth. Athanasius, fighting Arius, ended up round with emperors. I think 3 times he had to do a runner or was in exile or in trouble. Martin Luther, banging his things. Yes, he got some stuff wrong, but he saw a problem and he tackled it. Vern Brandt, repeatedly in trouble with the authorities, but couldn't but expose the lies that they're teaching. Martin Luther King, repeatedly in trouble, compelled to tackle something that was spiritually oppressive. The pro-life people have gone bankrupt in the cause of the gospel, righting an evil. 50 million abortions in the US alone. Mass infanticide you're talking about. Not reported as such. So is that a conspiracy? It's a false narrative based on a belief system that's a lie from the devil. It's part of the broader madness. So Jesus, where activity was spiritually abusive, he dealt with it and attacked it, and ultimately it would kill him. It would bring him into increasing conflict that would eventually cause him to be killed. He allows his capture, and he's silent as a lamb is before its shearers, before the conspiring powers against him. But in doing so, he super trumps it and defeats all conspiracy. This man, path and love we must follow. We lay down our lives in love for one another. As lambs amongst wolves, in dying we bring victory. And we must expect to lose everything. house, job, family, whatever, I must not compromise and I must follow Jesus, but expect to gain everything as well. Just a final note in application. History is heading towards a global gathering against the church. You're not paranoid if it's real. There was an LSD dealer I remember once hearing on the TV, and he said, yes, I'm so paranoid. I was so used to seeing things and saying, oh, no, you're not really seeing it, that when the police really did start following me, I was like, oh, no, they're not really following you. He's not really there. And of course they were. History is heading towards a global gathering against the church. There will be mass deception. So that's biblical. So expect it. Don't be a mug and trust Babylon's media blindly. Don't write off evidence-based exposés of conspiracy, false narrative. You may be enabling wickedness in doing that, or setting yourself up to be deceived. A questioning mindset concerning significant events is biblically legitimate. I'm not saying it has to be done, but it's okay. You don't need to shoot people down for saying, hey, what's going on? Who's benefiting? Don't let it become an obsession. Don't let it distract you from meeting with the brethren, from reading the Bible and praying and seeking fellowship. Studying darkness is not a blessing. Holiness is what kept Jesus. He prayed when they're trying to crown him by force. He doesn't do craftiness. He prays. He seeks his Father. And he trains brothers. He disciples brothers. The church is God's answer to this. The church super trumped Rome. The slave church, oppressed, tortured, misery, but it outlasted and ultimately broke Rome. Rome had to try and adopt it and co-opt it. So don't fear. God's going to outmaneuver the lot. There's nothing to fear. But the Bible teaches conspiracy, and it's a real world view. I hope if you're not a Christian, you also see the coherence of God's perspective, the realism he's got, that it aligns with our worldview uniquely. It's a unique view that, leaders are corrupt. Our own leaders are corrupt, but the church leaders throughout the Old Testament, New Testament, corruption is sown within their ranks. So questioning mindset towards authority is encouraged even within the church. Are they matching up to their words? Are they matching up to the Bible? Test them. I love this about the Bible. I love it. We're given a spirit of power, of love, and a sound mind. You're not called to be a mug. Embrace the truth. He's worth following. There you are. And he died and gave his life for wicked people like us and wicked people like Nero who could believe and find salvation. We might be in heaven with Nero and Hitler. We don't know where they were at. One must pray for our leaders and honor them. Yeah.